What's up, YouTube? It's me, your boy Dragon Masters 525, aka Keon, coming at you with another video. And today, guys, we are going to be talking about Godzilla Minus One. So, for all of you guys who didn't know, when Godzilla Minus One came out, me and my friend Bruno, he's also another artist. You should check him out on Instagram at bparasino. But he got some tickets for me, and we ended up going to the movie theaters together, and we ended up watching Godzilla Minus One. So this video is going to be more of a thoughts and review kind of video, and what I think about the movie, and just kind of like talking about the symbolism and kind of like stuff that I was seeing in the movie. So without further ado, let's just jump right into it, dude. So when we started the movie, the first thing that was shown was a kamikaze pilot, and I forgot the main character's name, but he didn't want to be a kamikaze pilot and ended up coming back to one of the islands that a lot of the engineers were stationed at. That's when we get a first glimpse of Godzilla, more so Godzillasaurus, which is, Godzilla before, all those crazy nuclear experiments were happening and stuff like that. So it shows Godzillasaurus just coming onto the island, getting pissed off and shit like that, killing the engineers, and the pilot being the only person left. And I thought that was pretty interesting. But it's cool because Godzillasaurus is just a big ass, giant ass dinosaur, that lives in the bottom of the ocean. And it's definitely different from Godzilla. And then, so after that, we get a time skip, right? We see our main character coming back to his town. Some people hate him. There's this girl that really hates him because he didn't kill himself to become a kamikaze pilot. So the lady felt that, he was doing how do I say this? That he wasn't doing his job right, and that her parents or her kids wouldn't have died if he would have died for his country. Which I thought, that's super crazy. It's super crazy, the fact that they expected, Japanese men to just kill themselves, right, to take out an enemy on a losing war. So there's that. You see a lot of stuff that's related to the war, because they were losing the war, and so because of that, right, they were going through a lot of struggles. There's barely any food, their homes were destroyed, right, a lot of people were dying, right. It was just not a fun time for the Japanese people during this era. So as the guy comes back, right, he's trying to do his own thing, ends up meeting a girl, right, that won't stop bothering him, and this girl has a little baby. And she goes into her backstory saying, yo, I took care of this baby, it's not my baby, blah 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 blah. And the guy was just like, oh damn, this is pretty crazy. So he ends up, taking them in, and they end up kind of working together and stuff like that. So they end up having kind of a nuclear family kind of dynamic, which I thought was pretty cool. But here's when it gets kind of crazy. So he still has kind of a little bit of PTSD from the war, and also PTSD from seeing Godzillasaurus. And as I can't remember which country, I think Japanese or America, as they were testing nukes and stuff like that, they were testing it in the area where Godzillasaurus was at. So it turned Godzillasaurus into Godzilla, which I thought was pretty crazy. So while this is happening, right, our characters, right, they're just living their life on Japan, right, rebuilding, getting jobs, making sure that, the quality of life is pretty good, which I thought was pretty cool because I'm an American, so I never really have to see that kind of struggle, because I personally don't know what it looks like for an area to be rebuilt after just straight bombings. It's never good, but it's interesting because it's something I've never seen or experienced before, only in historical mediums. So for me, I thought that the symbolism of all the destroyed, I feel the cities had some kind of symbolism in that, showing, the devastations of war, and showing pretty much what happens when you go to war, And so you know, a lot of people would strive for like peace and stuff like that. And I thought that's what for me, that's what I think the symbolism was representing. Um, but then again, I could be wrong. I only saw Godzilla minus one once, so I'm going off like what I remember. So as our characters are rebuilding and stuff like that, right? They get their jobs, right? Everything's doing good, and then our main character ends up getting a government job on a boat, on a wooden boat, in order to get not landmines, underwater mines. In the process, that's when he sees Godzilla again, and that's when we start getting into, you know, some crazy stuff. So as he's remembering, you know, dead fish, right? A Godzilla coming out. They try using one of the mines in order to blow up Godzilla because Godzilla was trying to go and destroy their ship, right? And in the process, they ended up blowing Godzilla's face, like a good portion of his face. And this is when we get to see the crazy powers that Godzilla has. Godzilla actually has insane regenerative powers. It's like instant, dude. It's actually insane. I've never seen something regenerate as fast as that, besides like Wolverine and Deadpool. And that's when I realized Godzilla was actually a bigger threat than what I realized. And that's why Godzilla couldn't be killed, because he has this insane nuclear like healing factor. It keeps him alive no matter what. And the more radiation he gets, the bigger he gets, which is even crazier. So this normal day that was supposed to be about just getting water mines ends up turning into a fight of survival and trying to stay alive from Godzilla, who's trying to chase them and kill them. And this is after Godzilla already like destroyed a couple ships, and there's just like a rumor going on, right? After this was happening, they ended up going back into the mainland, and Godzilla ended up coming there too. And Godzilla, oh my gosh, when he comes into I forgot the town that he destroyed, but it was a town that the main character's I guess we'll call her wife or a girlfriend was working in. Godzilla comes in, starts destroying and almost leveling the city, and then after that he uses his heat breath, right? And it's like 4 nuclear explosions all at once. That thing was huge. I never seen something as fast and fat. It's insane. And it's wild because like the way it works is Godzilla's back, right? The spikes goes into him, right? I don't know if it's into him or if it pops out. I'm pretty sure it's going in, right? But for this argument, we'll just say it's going out. But the way he uses his heat blast is insane. The amount of power that's just bubbling up, and I'm talking about nuclear power. And then when he spits it out, not only does he cause a crazy like explosion, but his face is also like searing and burning at the same time. Like you can see his flesh just crisping up, just on fire. It's insane. So as Godzilla is doing like that, causing mayhem, Tokyo and like everyone else, right, they're realizing like, yo, like this thing's a monster. We can't let this thing be alive or be around us anymore. So what they do is they bring a whole bunch of people and they try making a plan. They try making a plan in order to kill Godzilla because Godzilla is too much of a threat to keep alive. And so the Navy that was disbanded, I guess, kind of came back together, and they were asking for volunteers and stuff like that in order to beat Godzilla. And so there's a lot of planning that's happening. A lot of the men in that were requested to fight Godzilla, they were leaving too because they felt that they didn't really need to fight anymore. Even though this was a threat, right? They didn't want to fight anymore because they already fought in the World War, right? They were exhausted. Their country just lost, and they're like extremely, impoverished, and they're trying to get everything together, so they feel like it's not necessary to throw their lives away to stop Godzilla. And honestly, that's fair enough. Like, if a giant monster was coming like to destroy like a freaking city, I wouldn't go out there either, dude. Like, I would just chill. Like, I would not fight. But it's insane because like throughout the movie and stuff like that, and as we're seeing Godzilla, we're seeing a lot of like a culture difference. Because as an American, we have a pretty straight out, pretty forward culture, but in Japan, everything's a little bit different. I don't know if you would say it's conservative, but they have a really like really chill and a really specific way they do things. It's a lot more polite, and it's a lot more like a lot of people tend to help each other. So throughout this movie, you see a lot of specific things that are culturally about Japan. I know the movie is set in Japan, right? Tokyo, all that stuff. But as an American, I never really get to see a lot of Japanese culture, right? Unless I'm watching anime or doing like a documentary or watching a documentary or writing a paper. But as an American, most of the time, I don't know how Japan is, and I feel like in this movie we get to see a little bit of that. So it doesn't feel like it's just a giant monster movie or a giant kaiju movie. It feels more like the world's fleshed out. It feels a little bit more real, and you get to see things that are pretty interesting. For example, when we see the character's house for the first time, right? We see how their houses are inside. We see, you know, the politeness, the different ways, how they talk, the tone that they talk in, their beliefs, which I think is really interesting, how people interact with each other, and I like the fact that, like, there's a lot of emotion in how they talk, which is, like, super, super cool, because, like, when the main character was on the boat trying to get landmines and then fighting Godzilla, it felt like the characters on the boat were super cool. So there you have on the boat, you have a scientist, you have a seasoned fisherman, you have a newbie, and then you have our main character. And the way they interact with each other is like super hilarious. It's touching, it's hilarious, and it feels like I'm a part of that conversation, and it feels like I can really understand what they're trying to really convey. Because for me, it's really hard, like, for American media or American culture to really express yourself in that kind of way, especially as of recent, where everything is not as free, I guess, in terms of just expressing yourself. So seeing that and seeing how, even though it's Japan and even though it's like in the East, it still has like some elements of like Western culture mixed in and layered with the Japanese culture, because the conversation that they were having was pretty nice. Also another thing too, clothing, language, like the movie was in Japanese and I watched it subbed. I feel like that's probably the best way to watch it. I don't even know if there's a dub or not because I watched it in theaters, but it's really nice to see Toho really going in and beyond with this movie. Like, oh dude, like, it's so good. I really like seeing a lot of the clothing. I don't really think I've seen like a lot of the food in this movie, but I think it's mostly like clothing, architecture, just culture and media, obviously Godzilla, and then we get to see some technological advancements in there, like for example, as they were trying to stop Godzilla, they created a plan where they would wrap Godzilla in like CO2, bring him up to the surface, and then sink him down as fast as possible. And the reason why they were doing that is because they were trying to make it rise up from the depths, have increased pressure, and then sink him back down. And what that would do is that, because it's not equalizing, that the body of Godzilla couldn't take the strain and the amount of pressure from going up and down super fast. He couldn't depressurize. So we get to see some things that are pretty interesting, like the Navy ships that were used for World War in Japan mixed in with like tugboats and stuff like that. And we get to see how they would go up against a kaiju-like monster like Godzilla. When it was climaxing, I believe it climaxed during the ship part, which is more towards the end. Before that, we get to see a lot of stuff, you know, like a whole city destroyed. We saw Godzillasaurus, right, back in the I'm calling it prequel in the movie. And that was like before everything happened. And seeing how it started from like just the war, World War, up to like when Godzilla was destroying the city, and seeing it just keep getting worse and worse and worse progressively is so good. Only because the only reason I say that is because you really feel like, yo, like if we don't do something about this monster, like all of us, we're all gonna die. And as I'm sitting there, I'm really like on the edge of my seat. I'm like looking at it. I'm like, yo, like this is crazy. It keeps getting crazier and crazier and crazier. Oh my gosh, it's definitely one of the better movies that came out this year. And I normally don't give movie reviews, so it's like, it's a super good movie. I was holding back tears, man. The characters were really unique. I really got attached to some of the characters. The main character, I got really attached to him. One of the engineers that helped set up his fighter jet was pretty cool. The kid, his wife, were pretty cool. And I love how everything just kind of ties into each other. Like, it feels like I'm watching an anime where you have different characters in different sections, right? Everything's part of the same story, but everything's moving so fast. It's so good, and I feel like I'm never bored, and I feel like I'm always looking forward to the next scene. In terms of imagery, though, it's pretty aggressive. How would I say it? I'm kind of like 50-50. I want to say it's pretty aggressive in terms of imagery, because like we get to see Japan after they got bombed, and seeing a lot of the Japanese folk have an insane amount of trauma because they lost a lot of loved ones, and then seeing a kamikaze pilot, you know, obviously alive but not dead, kind of like was triggering for them. And it's different because like, as an American, I'm not a part of that culture, like I said, and so seeing that was kind of like almost like a little bit of a culture shock, because obviously I've read about kamikazes in history, but I never really knew like what it was or how important it was to the military at that time. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying it's good, obviously, because no one should kill themselves, but I feel like it's insane how a whole government system, in order to win desperately a war, they would be willing to sacrifice their soldiers at the cost that they can win just a little bit. And seeing a whole bunch of people be mad at a person who didn't kill themselves for their country, I thought was pretty insane. I never really thought how crazy or how aggressive that was until I saw the movie. It wasn't even a thought in my mind, which I thought was like pretty interesting. They show a little bit of food too here and there, you know, soups and stuff like that. There's times where a lot of the characters will be like eating together, and they will, you know, be talking about how they feel, kind of like their goals, which I thought was pretty cool. And I feel like everyone had a goal that they were fighting for. It wasn't just like, let's kill Godzilla. It was like, yo, I have something to fight for. I need to go and destroy this monster ASAP. Some people were fighting for family. Some people were fighting for their homeland. Some people were fighting for themselves. And it's cool seeing different, I guess, generations of people in this movie, young and old, kind of come together to destroy this giant kaiju that they feel like they have no hope. And I feel like the whole point of the movie is literally to have hope, because like they need to all work together in order to destroy something that they think that they can't win against, you know? And honestly, it's true, because like even though they feel like they killed Godzilla, at the end, yo, I'm gonna spoil it. Spoiler alert. If you want to skip this, skip it. But they end up kind of killing Godzilla only for him to kind of come back alive. And so seeing how they stopped it only for a little bit is like pretty cool. Things that I want to talk about in terms of like Godzilla -1, I definitely feel like it's a bit of like a prequel series or a prequel movie, because like -1, I'm thinking in my mind -1 is 0, like it's, you know, the start, like a prequel. And I feel like the beginning of this movie was like that too, because we see Godzillasaurus before any of the like nuclear experiments and stuff like that in the nearby islands. And it's weird seeing a whole ass like dinosaur still kind of like around. I definitely think the main character should have definitely tried to kill Godzillasaurus in the beginning. One thing that we see throughout the series or throughout the movie is that our main character is going through an insane level of PTSD, and that level of PTSD is really affecting him because when he came back onto the island when he didn't want to kill himself as a kamikaze pilot, he lost a whole squad of engineers, right, to Godzillasaurus, and he still thinks about that because there's one surviving engineer, and that engineer was pissed at our main character because he gave him the order to shoot with a 20mm Vulcan, right, that's attached to his jet, and instead he kind of pussied out, lost a bunch of people, and then at the end, right, the engineer forced him to kind of carry the pictures of like the people that he let die. And throughout the series, throughout the movie, our main character is always looking at these pictures, always looking and always thinking, and he's like traumatized. He's done fighting. He doesn't want any more people to die, and he's always like remembering that because he's forced to keep holding the pictures, right? It's like seeing ghosts, and that's his kind of like, I want to say the metaphorical sin, right? That's his like sin to carry, his weight, because he let them die, right? And what's cool is that the engineer, right, comes back and helps him, right, and is like buddy with him. And even then, it kind of shows his progression because he goes from like carrying all this weight and burden to finally letting it go and not wanting to kill himself, which is super important because like I feel like that's the whole takeaway of this movie. Almost, I feel like the whole takeaway is that like upon extreme like challenges, right, and under no hope of winning at all, he still finds a way to win. He still finds a way to push through it, to push through whatever he's going through, right? In this instance, it's trauma, PTSD, and to actually like save his home country and save the people that were there. And I feel like that's so important because Godzilla, don't get me wrong, Godzilla is super cool. Godzilla's amazing, but I feel like it was more about the characters than it really was Godzilla. And it's just like a really beautiful movie. I can't, oh man, it's stuck in my head, and it's a movie that I'm definitely gonna buy on DVD or Blu-ray. But the characters were nice. The imagery was, somewhat aggressive if you're not used to hard imagery. They had like stuff from World War II. They had like files. They had like this whole like retro aesthetic that's attached to that because the movie was set in like the 40s and in the 50s, and it kept on going up until we got to Godzilla. And so the progression of technology, progression of like Japanese culture within the movie, the progression of Godzilla being somewhat of a neutral monster to it being a monster that, Japan has to defend itself against was pretty cool. It's a lot different from, I feel like, the original movies. There are some parts though of this movie that is similar to the first one. I'm talking about the 1951. Like there's this train scene where Godzilla pick up a train, and we see the main character's Boothang, right, just hanging, dude, like hanging. If it was me, I have clammy hands, right, because my hands get sweaty. If it was me, I'd slip and I'd die. But I'm surprised that one of our main characters was able to survive like, safely, and in a smart way too. So in this movie, like you'll see a lot of references to the first 1950 Godzilla movie, and I think that's really cool because I recently watched the 1950s Godzilla movie with my friend Bruno, and we're going through this whole Godzilla marathon, and we're seeing like it's almost not reusing the original movie, but it's adding pieces of the original movie, remaking it, and adding it into a better storyline, and it's making the storyline so much more dynamic. Because I'm a fan of Godzilla, my brother is too, my friends are, and so whenever we go and whenever we see like old movies, we've always had like a good time. And the fact that they were able to keep like pieces of the original while still making it modern was super cool. oh, the CGI was perfect, and I really felt like Godzilla was actually like a really big, freaky, like scary kaiju. Because I've always thought the 1950 Godzilla was kind of scary, but whenever I looked at its eyes, a lot of the scary factor of it was just not there because it had almost like googly eyes, kind of eyes. But oh man, it's just overall, it's just a really good movie, right? It has a really nice story, plot, and development. The climax is so good, and it's a movie that I know for sure you're gonna be like really feeling it. I'm a person that doesn't really cry at mediums, right? I don't really cry at anime, movies, TV shows, and so being there or watching it on a big screen, feeling the emotions that these guys are feeling, and feeling like I'm about to cry is a pretty good feeling because I feel like I'm emotionally invested into this movie, and I feel like, oh man, it was just so good. Like, I want to watch it again in theaters. That's how good it really is. And I really like how it's like a break from modern media, because I feel like as of late modern media just hasn't been true to like what it's supposed to be, and that is entertaining and, you know, being a part of the culture. So I feel like Godzilla kind of restores a little bit of that because, you know, it's a pop culture icon. Godzilla, everyone knows Godzilla, and so seeing that is like really nice. It's refreshing, it's new, it's good, it's a shiny, you know, like it's so worth watching in the theaters, and it's so worth like having. It's something that I'm gonna add to my growing collection of movies and stuff like that. But oh man, another thing too that I want to talk about is I do want to talk about the amount of nuclear experimentation that was going on in some of the islands before I forget, because it's insane how much like an ecosystem was changed just due to like nuclear radiation and just mutation. And I feel like this movie touches up on that a lot. It's always going to remind you about the nuclear war that happened. It's always going to tell you about, you know, the nuclear experimentations that were happening off the coasts and stuff like that. And it's going to show you how like excuse me, sorry, my bad. It's also going to show you like what happens when you fuck around and find out. They were fucking around with nuclear weapons, right? Obviously they have to test it somewhere, but they tested it on the ocean, and the cause and effect is that they created an even bigger monster. Godzillasaurus was already big, and it was already a monster, right? It was an outlier, nothing nuclear affected it. It was just a giant dinosaur. And then nuclear stuff happened, and then boom, it got so much radiation and became so huge, dude. So huge. Like, you really see how big Godzilla really is, and then you realize, you're like, yo, we fucked up. One of my favorite scenes in the movie, actually, when you get a scale of Godzilla, was, I want to say like mid part of the movie when he's destroying the city. It's a city it's not Tokyo. It's another city. I can't really remember what city it is. I don't know if it starts with an S or a C, but it was cool because like we see a building filled with like a bunch of news reporters, and they're reporting it as fast as possible. Like, they're reporting how crazy things are going, and then Godzilla ends up destroying their the tower that they're on, and they're slipping and sliding and falling into the ground. And I think that's crazy because like you see how dedicated a journalist is to doing accurate news that's currently happening, and they're willing to give up their lives just so that they can see Godzilla and report on it. But it kind of bit them in the ass because they ended up dying for that. So just like stuff like that, it's like it makes you realize like, yo, like you can't be fucking around when Godzilla comes around, because like you could be losing your life at any moment or any time, and it makes you want to survive longer and harder. And in that same scene, like a couple, I want to say like maybe like 5 or 6 minutes later, I think, I'm not really too sure, but that's when Godzilla creates that huge giant explosion, and dude, it's like a giant nuke, dude. It's like insane. It's like triple a nuke, and that thing was it blew up in the town, in the city, and then the explosion just pushed everything out. And then you see our main character's like wife or girlfriend, whatever you want to call her, just get swept away, right? He's there just chilling, right? And then his girlfriend just pushes him, right? So he doesn't get caught up with the blast. You see her hand grabbing his, right? She just gets swept by debris and the amount of force, right? And then when everything happens, you see just everything destroyed. And then the guy, he's just stumbling, right? He falls onto the ground and he's just looking up, and then he hits the most insane blood-curdling scream that I've ever seen anyone do in a movie. Like, I felt that shit in my core, man. I was there. I'm feeling it, dude. And the best part about that is while he's giving this scream that as if he like lost someone, which he did, you just see oil just raining down from the sky, just covering just the area. And that's when I knew this movie was insane, dude. Like, oh man, it's so good, so good. It's so good. Oh man, this is like one of the few modern movies that I really feel like really did Godzilla justice as a remake. It's Toho did such an amazing job, and it makes you wonder. There has to be a next part. It's so good. It's so good. But yeah, that's pretty much like my review, my thoughts on Godzilla -1. I'd say it's definitely a little bit of a prequel, right? And it's like a first part. Characters were good. Imagery, amazing. I like a lot of historical stuff that was added in that movie. And personally, I think if it would have came out earlier this year, like in January, it would probably be the top rated movie of this year. And I still think it is. Even though we're still at the end of the year, like I still think it is probably the best movie that's come out this year. But yeah, that's my synopsis, or like my review, my thoughts on Godzilla -1. If you guys definitely liked the video, definitely give it a thumbs up. If not, give it a thumbs down, and let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Also, if you guys want to see more like mini reviews like this in the future, definitely let me know. I'll think about making more. This is a request by my friend Bruno. So Bruno, if you're watching, I hope you like the video. If you guys don't want to miss any other uploads, definitely hit the bell icon so you guys don't miss when I upload, because I upload frequently. Also, if you guys want to help support the channel, definitely hit the subscribe button, because we're on the road to 4K, and I appreciate every one of you guys getting us to 3,000 subscribers. Anyways, guys, this is me, your boy, Dragon Masters 525, aka Keon, signing out, dude. Peace!